The Vanguard. Chapter 1. The Beginning. The small vessel eased into the vast expanse of the Vanguard Gateway Station, blue. Its hull, still warm from transit, shimmered faintly under the station's cold orbital lights. A signal was transmitted. "We are carrying a recruit of the Vanguard Elite Service, requesting clearance." For a moment, only silence. Then acknowledgement. The station verified the vessel's credentials and granted entry. Indra stood still as the docking clamps engaged. At 25, a man of old Earth, of Delhi, he could scarcely believe his fortune. The Vanguard cadet examination was no mere test. It was a crucible, mental, physical, and existential, where humans stood not only against one another, but against artificial intelligence itself. Across the solar system, millions aspired. Only 100 were chosen. He was one of them. Perhaps fortune had indeed favored him through the reservation system. Many across the solar system resented it. To them, it was an outdated privilege, a remnant of sentiment rather than merit. And yet, old Earth was still revered, the cradle of humanity, the place where it all began. For that reason alone, 10 seats in the Vanguard cadet examination were reserved exclusively for those who still called Earth home. It was a different path. One did not need to surpass the finest minds of the solar system, only to rise above the best of old Earth and meet the required threshold. For others, the bar was far higher. Indra had reached that threshold, and he had been the only one. The station unfolded before him, vast, geometric, alive. Robotic aids relieved him of his belongings as he was guided through luminous corridors into the transit tubes. Moments later, he arrived at his quarters, alone, the only successful candidate from Earth's reserved seats. Across planets, moons, and orbital cities, Vanguard shuttles gathered the chosen and carried them to the 5 great gateway stations: Terra Union, Martian Directorate, Belt Ironians, Jovian Federation, and Saturnian Kingdoms. From there, they would journey onward. This year, training would begin at Gateway Station, Gold, orbiting Saturn. But before that, there was the Gatebreaker.
All systems nominal.
Morning
Next target.
came, though Indra barely noticed. Excitement dulled hunger. Anticipation overrode routine. A service droid arrived at precisely the scheduled second. Silent, efficient, its movements optimized to the millimeter, and escorted him through restricted transit corridors toward the docking spine. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. Civilian noise faded, replaced by the low, constant hum of power systems, reactors, field generators, and the distant pulse of station-scale infrastructure. Then he saw it. The Vanguard Gatebreaker. It did not resemble conventional spacecraft. There were no broad hulls or ornamental structures, only a long, needle-like geometry layered in segmented armor and radiator spines, tapering forward into a reinforced bow designed to meet interstellar dust at relativistic velocities. Not merely a ship, but a statement of intent. Legends spoke of it in whispers, a vessel capable of reaching half the speed of light. A machine that did not cross distance, but erased it. Indra stepped inside. The interior was vast, but not in the way he expected. There were no open halls or grand chambers, only structured compartments arranged along a central spine. Everything was modular, optimized, purposeful. Passengers were secured within acceleration couches embedded in shock-damped frames. Cargo modules were locked into magnetic rails, each unit balanced precisely against the ship's mass distribution model. Overhead, conduits carried cryogenic fuel, superconducting currents, and data streams moving at near-light latency. Every system was active, every system was waiting. A faint vibration ran through the structure, not instability, but containment. Power, held in check. Indra had studied the gatebreaker long before he ever set foot inside one. It was not a conventional spacecraft. It did not carry the energy required for its journey, but drew it from the vast infrastructure of Vanguard itself. The vessel relied on a laser sail system where immense phased arrays at the gateway stations projected coherent beams that struck its receiver plates, pushing it to relativistic speeds without expending onboard propellant. These journeys were only possible through the meticulously maintained Vanguard transit highways, corridors of space continuously cleared of even microscopic debris, where a single particle at such velocities could prove catastrophic. And when the great beams of Earth gave way to those of Saturn, the same light that had accelerated the ship began to slow it. In the final approach, it was the ship's own fusion drive, precise, controlled, and immensely powerful, that took over, guiding the gatebreaker through its last moments of motion and into perfect stillness against the waiting gateway. Indra looked at the passenger seats and the cargo bays, the inner sanctuary. The crew was there as well. He knew why they were all housed within the small belly of that gargantuan structure. He had read about it in theory, but experiencing it was something else entirely. The gatebreaker did not simply protect its passengers and cargo from acceleration, it redefined how that acceleration was felt. Deep within its structure, a network of superconducting coils generated precisely tuned electromagnetic field gradients, shaping the forces acting across every meter of the ship's interior. These fields worked in tandem with a controlled space-time stress distribution, subtly altering how momentum propagated through matter, ensuring that no single part of the human body bore the full brunt of acceleration. At the heart of it all was a system Vanguard engineers referred to as mass inertia modulation, a process that effectively reduced the inertial response of objects within the ship's protected frame. To an external observer, the gatebreaker endured immense thrust, driven forward by relentless beams of light. Inside, however, the violence of that motion was diffused into something almost gentle, a steady, uniform pressure, as if gravity itself had been carefully dialed to a tolerable level. It was an engineering marvel, one that had made humanity the masters of the solar system.
All systems nominal. Awaiting next target.
It was said that Vanguard had begun scarcely 20 sol years before, an eye blink in the history of civilization, yet its impact had already eclipsed centuries of progress. At its origin stood Aaron Solis of the Martian Directorate, a physicist-engineer whose work had once been dismissed as elegant impossibility. Where others saw insurmountable limits, he saw convergence. He did not invent fusion. He did not invent lasers. He unified them. What had existed as separate triumphs of human ingenuity, high-efficiency fusion reactors, and beamed energy propulsion, he forged into a single, coherent system. A system not of machines alone, but of infrastructure spanning worlds, laser arrays stretching across thousands of kilometers, phased, synchronized, and precise beyond comprehension, capable of projecting coherent energy across astronomical distances without divergence. Fusion cores that sustained plasma at temperatures rivaling stellar interiors, feeding those arrays with relentless controlled power. Individually, they were marvels. Together, they became something else. They became the Vanguard highways, not paths, but corridors of certainty, carved through the chaos of space. Regions continuously mapped, swept, and sterilized of even the smallest debris. In those corridors, the randomness of the cosmos was replaced with order, predictability, control. Within them, ships no longer wandered, they traversed. Relativistic travel, once confined to equations and distant speculation, became operational reality, repeatable, reliable, routine. And in that moment, something fundamental changed. Distance, once the defining barrier of the solar system, lost its authority. What had taken months became hours. What had required isolation became connection. Worlds that had lived in asynchronous isolation began to move in step. Trade did not merely increase, it transformed, flowing in continuous streams across planetary economies. Militaries no longer planned in days or weeks, but in hours, redefining strategy itself. Communication, logistics, governance, every system bent to the new rhythm imposed by Vanguard. Civilizations, once separated by silence and delay, began to synchronize. Time across the solar system acquired a shared meaning. Vanguard was no longer a service. It was no longer an innovation. It was infrastructure, invisible, indispensable, and absolute. The framework upon which modern humanity now depended. The silent network that bound planets, stations, and habitats into a single interdependent system. The spine of humanity. The gate breaker disengaged. Docking clamps released with measured precision, each movement deliberate, controlled. Microthrusters whispered to life, guiding the vessel gently away from the station's mass shadow. It drifted free, slow, composed, its long frame aligning with the outbound corridor as if drawn into place by unseen intent. Then, within its depths, the ship changed. Systems shifted state in seamless succession. The fusion core rose to readiness, its contained star stirring behind layers of control. Magnetic fields tightened, refining their hold. Thermal systems expanded into high-capacity flow, preparing to carry away the burden of immense energy. Structural integrity fields adjusted, anticipating the stresses yet to come. The gatebreaker settled into itself, no longer docked, no longer at rest. Awake. The engines stirred, not with fire, but with presence. From the void behind, the gateway laser array came alive. No flame marked its awakening, no visible arc of energy. Only the silent alignment of power beyond human perception. Invisible to the eye, yet immense in magnitude, coherent beams reached across the vacuum and found their mark upon the ship's aft sail, a layered, heat-resistant composite engineered to endure and transform the relentless pressure of light into motion. The contact was flawless. Photon momentum translated into thrust with unerring precision, every fraction of energy captured, directed, and sustained. There was no recoil, no vibration, no turbulence to betray the scale of the force at work. Only a steady, unwavering push, only acceleration. The corridor ahead had been cleared to sub-millimeter tolerances. Autonomous drones had spent weeks removing debris, vaporizing micrometeoroids, mapping particle density. At these velocities, even a grain of dust carried catastrophic energy. There could be no margin of error. Acceleration began to build, silently, relentlessly. Indra felt it, not as a sudden push, but as a deepening, sustained pressure, perfectly measured and meticulously controlled. The ship's inertial compensation systems absorbed and redistributed the force, spreading it evenly through every surface, every structure, every living body within, leaving no point burdened, no moment unbalanced. There was no violence to it, no strain, only a steady insistence. Time seemed to loosen its grip, stretching at the edges of perception, while space ahead compressed into something narrower, more immediate, as though distance itself were yielding to the will of the ship. The journey had truly begun. By Vanguard reckoning, the Earth to Saturn transit lasted 18 Sol hours, barely 5.5 standard old Earth hours. Under Earth Gateway's beam, the gatebreaker climbed through 1/10 light in around 2 Sol hours, past 2/10 in just over 3.5 Sol hours, and continued its relentless acceleration until it touched half-light velocity near the exact midpoint of the corridor. It held that speed only briefly, no more than a few Earth standard minutes, before Saturn's beam seized the forward receiver and began the long, measured surrender of momentum. The journey was not defined by cruising at 0.5 C, but by the precision with which light itself handed the ship from one world to another. At the midpoint, the Earth-based beam fell away with surgical precision. For the briefest instant, there was nothing. No push, no pressure, no guiding force. Only the vast, indifferent silence of space. Then, from the darkness ahead, a new alignment emerged. Not seen, but sensed. An invisible geometry resolving across the void. Saturn. The receiving gateway array had already found them, its vast lattice of emitters locking onto the ship with flawless certainty, as though the distance between worlds had never truly existed. The same physics that had driven them forward now turned against their motion. Photon pressure opposed velocity. Momentum did not vanish. It was surrendered, bled away in precisely measured increments. Thermal loads surged as incoming energy was absorbed and redirected through the ship's vast radiative systems, heat carried outward in controlled streams. Deceleration began, gradual, exact, unforgiving. Velocity fell from 0.5 C to 0.1 C to 0.01 C to 0.001 C until, once again, the universe returned to something familiar. Space behaved normally. At terminal approach, the fusion drive awakened. Unlike the silent, distant force of the laser beam, this was power born within the ship itself, a contained star brought to purpose. Controlled fusion pulses ignited in rapid succession, their plasma channeled through a magnetic nozzle, producing finely tuned thrust vectors for the delicate work of maneuvering. Short bursts, measured corrections, perfect alignment. The gatebreaker eased into synchrony with the Saturnian gateway, its immense velocity reduced to near stillness. Docking clamps extended. Contact. Lock. Indra exhaled. For the first time since departure, he had crossed 10 astronomical units in matter of few hours. As per the Vanguard schedule, the transit from Earth Gateway to Saturn Gateway took 18 Sol hours. For Indra, sealed within the gatebreaker's relativistic frame, less time had passed, just over 17 hours. When he stepped out at Saturn, the station clocks were already approximately an hour ahead of his own. This was the journey not only in space, but in time, a journey reserved for the powerful, the wealthy, the untouchable. And yet, he had arrived, though he did not yet understand what awaited him, only that this brilliance was merely the light before the abyss.